Greetings and salutations. Today, my friends, the word of the day is extremist. Yes, extremist is our word of the day. According to Oxford Dictionaries, the definition of extremist is, quote, a person who holds extreme political or religious views, especially one who advocates illegal, violent, or other extreme action. Looking around the world today, one could say that both here in the United States and in many other countries around the world, we are surrounded and even led by extremists. Just take a gander at our headlines. For example, an extremist is someone who believes poor people trying to cross a border for a better life are animals. That, my friend, would be an extremist who holds that view. Extremists are folks who would push us into World War III just to prove themselves right about a political fairy tale. Yes, those are extremists. They even have their own television shows on MS. Anyway, an extremist is someone who would set fire to a sacred place of worship because they don't like the parishioners' skin color and culture. That is an extremist. Yes, buried behind the latest headlines of Mueller reports and Birkin bags saving the resale market, the New York Times is reporting that 3 historically black churches have burned in less than 2 weeks in one South Louisiana parish, where officials said they have found suspicious elements in each case. While there is still no official motives or suspects, there is a very long and ugly white supremacist history of burning predominantly black churches here in the United States, especially in the southern states. These latest fires come after 3 straight years of hate crime increases in the U.S., including a 17% rise in just 2017 alone. And here is where the twist, my friends, comes in, because according to the ACLU, at a time when violence by white supremacists is on the rise, the FBI appears to be targeting black people in a secret intelligence program concerning so-called black identity extremists. An extremist group that, well, doesn't actually seem to exist. Isn't that extreme? So today, let's take a hard look just where U.S. law enforcement priorities are when it comes to combating extremism as we start watching the Hawks.
If you want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets, never back down like Tyrell, and the truth is what you seek. To analyze, investigate from the bottom to the top. You speak your mind like Sean Stone, whether they like it or not. I got Tabitha, Miss Wallace, with the wisdom and the pearl. Between the outrage and the evidence, what's going on in this world? Watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks. Listen when they talk.
Welcome, everyone, to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I'm Tabitha Wallace. And joining us now from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to discuss extremism and U.S. law enforcement's priorities when prosecuting and combating, it is civil rights attorney Nekima Levi Armstrong. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Nekima, well, we don't know at this time who or what is ultimately responsible for this recent round of church burnings in Louisiana that took place at the end of March and early April. What is the significance of church burnings historically in the struggle for civil rights here in the United States?
Well, since the 1950s and 60s, we've seen attacks on African American churches, and in terms of arson that's happened, bombings of churches, and in some cases, even folks who are armed and dangerous coming into black churches, as we saw with Dylan Roof in 2005, when he came into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and killed 9 African-American people during Bible study. And so the folks who live in St. Landry Parish should be on high alert, because law enforcement officials are not yet sure whether or not this rash of church burnings is related to a white supremacist activity or not.
Tell me, in August of 2017, after the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, the FBI issued a very controversial intelligence assessment that was titled Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers. Nekima, what is a so-called black identity extremist? And is there any actual evidence that a group like this even exists?
Well, Tabitha, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if I was personally on that list of alleged Black identity extremists. As someone who has been involved in Black Lives Matter marches and demonstrations, we were largely targeted by law enforcement during that period of time, as well as activists around the country who were simply standing up for freedom, justice, and equality and calling for an end to police violence and abuse and calling for an end to police being able to kill people with impunity. It's absolutely absurd that our government would target people who are standing up in the tradition of those who came before us as part of the civil rights movement, as opposed to targeting white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan and folks who have engaged in terrorism throughout our history in this country.
You know, it's interesting because it's after refusing to hand over any information, they did a FOIA request on you know, how exactly Black identity extremist labels being used by law enforcement and the FBI. The ACLU is now suing the FBI to open up their records. It's come to a lawsuit. Why is this lawsuit important, and why as a public do we need to see these records and how law enforcement's using this term in their investigations?
Well, this lawsuit is important for those of us who have been targeted or who might be targeted in the future for engaging in nonviolent demonstrations to know how far the U.S. government has gone in terms of conducting surveillance upon African Americans. We have seen this in the past during the 1950s and 60s. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders were constantly under surveillance by our U.S. government. And we are just now in the 21st century getting a glimpse into the scope of the surveillance that was conducted during that time. We know that tremendous law enforcement resources have been devoted to conducting surveillance on African Americans, again, who are simply standing up for freedom, justice, and equality and engaging in nonviolent demonstrations. Now, I wish, as an African American person and as a civil rights attorney, that our government would devote significantly more resources to targeting white supremacists and hate groups, because we know that there has been a significant increase in those types of crimes that have happened within the last several years. And so in order for us as African Americans, as demonstrators, as peaceful protesters to feel safe, we want our government to shift their focus and the way in which they prioritize the use of resources to go after those folks who are actually wreaking havoc upon communities of color.
And I think that's what's really important to remember in this situation, because as you connect these two events or these two situations, when you look at how tragic these fires are, and as the constant, we get reminded of these church fires, as you said, you know, whether it's a mass shooting or another one of these places being burned down, those things connect. Yes. So these churches in Louisiana being burned down, to me, is a pretty direct relation to them, the FBI not taking the white nationalist extremist portion of the population that is responsible. I mean, I don't know anybody else except for a white nationalist or white racist that would be off burning Black churches. I mean, that's historically, that's who does it. Yeah. And I wonder if when you take that with the FBI's long history, FBI has a very long history of ignoring violence against Black communities in general. These church fires are another reason, but the FBI has a long history of these investigations as a cover for surveillance. They've infiltrated everyone from, you know, the Black Panthers, the American Indian movement, even. Is this showing us that it's still happening today? And how has this shaped the fight for civil rights in the United States right now as we move forward?
Well, it's absolutely still showing up today. Just even the fact that there is a focus on so-called Black identity extremists by our U.S. government shows that we have a significant problem in terms of seeing Black power as a threat, in terms of seeing activists as a threat, as opposed to looking at those individuals who have consistently terrorized African Americans since the end of slavery in this country, and who continue to engage in hate crimes and very dangerous activities such as the arsons and the shootings within black churches that we just talked about that really need to be the focus of law enforcement's attention and the resources that they have. I would like to see a significant shift happen. I do not think that it's going to happen under the watch of the current president of the United States, who many believe is helping to fuel a lot of the hate that is going on through the rhetoric that he speaks on a regular basis. I do not feel safe. And I do not feel that my community is safe as long as we continue to ignore the threat of white nationalists and white supremacists.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think it's also one of these things where you see these reports that the FBI issues and things like that, because it's also, you have to remember, Black Lives Matter came out of, that's criticizing law enforcement, and that's holding law enforcement accountable, and so naturally they're going to push back at those who would hold them accountable. I want to thank you so much for coming on today. Civil rights attorney Nekima Levy-Armstrong, always a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to break, Hawk Watchers, let us celebrate a deportation that is actually for good rather than bad. On Saturday, the San Diego Zoo announced that its 2 giant pandas will be leaving the zoo and heading back to China. After more than 2 decades of an international effort to bring the species back from extinction, Chinese officials and the zoo announced that because of that effort, the giant panda species is no longer on the verge of extinction. And it's time for the zoo's 2 pandas to return to their home country of China. Congratulations to the pandas and to the human beings that work so hard to create rather than destroy.
All right, and as we go to break, Hawk Watchers, don't forget to let us know what what you think of the topics we've covered on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and see our full shows at RT.com. Coming up, Tabitha and I wonder why, oh why, the Pentagon is no longer talking to reporters, and then we crunch the numbers on the staggering financial costs of our plastic-filled oceans. Don't miss it. Stay tuned to Watching the Hawks.
Dear viewer, thank you for finally changing the channel. I understand you're tired of networks that blur news with views. You're tired of commentary presented as fact and facts presented as commentary. They are not the same, no matter what the partisan hack want you to think. You know me. I'm famous for my views, and you'll get them, and the news, and me. Yours truly, Scotty Nell Hughes.
Do you know what you've got in your hand? You might think it's a phone, but in the news, we see it as TV. With Pluto TV, the free and unlimited TV app, you can get TV everywhere for free. And since TV is everywhere, so is RT. Streaming on all your favorite devices, outdoors or inside, any time of day or night. Catch all of our award-winning shows, news, and cutting-edge analysis everywhere you look and wherever you go. Question more.
The last time we saw an official Defense Department spokesperson or a defense official hold a televised press conference was 300 days ago, and the Pentagon doesn't seem to have an explanation why. Defense Department spokesman Charles Summers told the press, quote, "I can't tell you why it's been so long, but I know that we will go on camera, and when we're ready to do that, I will let you know." Now, the Air Force and the Marine Corps have not ceased to have press conferences, but the Navy and the Army have cut back on general officer announcements, mainly to avoid cyber attacks against those officers. However, despite the fact that it has been not only commonplace but a long-standing practice to hold these regular press conferences, the current U.S. Defense Department seem to be afraid of speaking to the press. Whatever the reasoning may be, avoiding the press does not help the problem of misinformation. In fact, it makes it worse because the incorrect reports are not corrected in a timely manner by officials. Retired Army Lieutenant General Russell Honore, known best for being the commander who took control of the fiasco that happened with Hurricane Katrina response after FEMA had fouled it up. He recalled a paper written by Admiral Elmo Zumwalt regarding how to use the media to help the American people stay informed. He told Task and Purpose magazine, "Zumwalt taught us that you can use the press to speak to the American people. You've got to take into account that people loan us their sons and their daughters, and they want to know what the hell we're doing with them.
Yes, they do. And also, let's not forget, I also like this idea of the Pentagon and all that, too. Let's not forget, that building you see there, everything the Pentagon uses on a daily basis, from the pens to the bullets to the rockets, we pay for. The American people pay for these things. So it really offends me, actually, that they haven't had a press conference or a briefing. Look, in 300 days. That really, I mean, this silence comes as, Trump has now designated the Iranian, Revolutionary Guard as terrorists. You have 3 American service members plus 1 contractor recently killed in Afghanistan.
Yes, correct.
But not a word out of the Pentagon officially. They've talked to the press, but not like in the actual room talking to reporters.
No, and it doesn't get quickly. And the point of this press conference isn't, I think there's this idea right now is that the press is just there trying to get sound bites for clicks. And the truth is, part of it's because you have reports that come out in the morning or the day before, and they need to confirm or deny those. And the idea that it's not saving any money and it's not saving any time, because reporters are still going to have to go and try to follow up on that stuff and bug them while they're trying to do other things, as opposed to during a designated time.
Well, and look, we know, Deb, me and you have been watching these press briefings from like the mainstream, press corps and the corporate press corps, and we know that most of the time it's pretty softball stuff.
Of course.
We got to, worship at the feet of the military-industrial complex. But you still would at least like some press interaction. And that's what so blows my mind and is so ridiculous about this 300 days.
Yeah. It's very odd. And what's actually kind of interesting, this was brought up a while ago, but it came back up because people started looking like, oh, wow, so apparently King Leonidas, yes, Gerard Butler, has actually briefed the Pentagon press corps and taken questions from the press rather than an official Defense Department spokesman. So he was in the room, just so you know, he was in the room full of Pentagon reporters during his PR tour for his latest film, Hunter Killer, which had the Pentagon helped work with because, it's a war movie. But I think what's really funny is that the last time that there was an actual official press conference at the Pentagon was on May 31st of last year.
Wow.
And it was when Dina White spoke on camera. And what's really interesting about that is one of the questions she answered was, because they were recently doing one of the filming for the new Top Gun movie. She wondered if, the press wondered if it would be an accurate portrayal of...
Some hard-hitting questions right there being thrown at our Pentagon officials.
Yeah.
And Tab, look, they have, I mean, like I said, various defense officials have spoken on camera, just not in the briefing room, since then, but this is 300 some odd days without a televised press conference. And I wonder, Tabitha, do you think that there's a connection between what's happening in the White House and, the Pentagon, why we're suddenly not seeing these briefings anymore?
Personally,
it
looks like what happens when you have a manager and you have an upper management and middle management doesn't want to say the opposite of whatever management said to the press, so they don't talk. And because there's been so many questions about whether the generals know better than Trump and the White House really wants to, one of the things that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had said that she really wants to is keeping that information compartmentalized, keeping the messaging of the White House and the administration in one place. And I think that allowing the Defense Department, when everything is about defense right now, everything involves them. I think the idea is to keep things simple, but I don't think it's going to be historically going to look so good in reflection back.
It's not. I mean, almost a year without having an official press conference and an official interaction with the meeting does not look good historically.
Which is what Trump rightfully brought up, that Obama hadn't done a press conference, Hillary hadn't done a press conference for 6-8 months. So press conferences are good.
Yeah.
It's the time for you guys to work together.
Please.
Hopefully.
The Marine Pollution Bulletin released a report this week regarding the monetary cost of plastic pollution in our oceans, and it shows that going green isn't just for eco-warriors and anti-capitalists. You see, the ocean provides us with a number of what they call ecosystem services and what we would call the benefits of nature. From food to carbon storage, our oceans are necessary for our survival. As a species, all of us, as the study points out, any threat to the continued supply of these ecosystem services has the potential to significantly impact the well-beings of humans across the globe. And after reviewing 1,191 data points, researchers were able to calculate that plastic pollution costs us over $2.5 trillion per year. Yes, $1 trillion per year. It is estimated that the cost to clean up the plastic in the oceans can run upwards of $33,000 per ton, putting the cost of removing just the 8 billion tons of plastic that enter our oceans each year to over $230 billion every single year, just to keep it from getting worse. From lost revenue to general well-being, the true cost of continuing to ignore this problem of plastic could be catastrophic to this little rock we call Earth. And this study only scratched the surface. So, Hawk Watchers, is the true cost of plastic really worth continuing to support industries that are poisoning our bodies, our oceans, and now our pocketbooks? I ask you.
I don't think it is. But I think most people don't actually understand where most of their plastic comes from and how big and what it actually also connects to the petroleum industry. That's part of the whole climate change issue.
Yup.
It's kind of hard. So one of the things I think that's interesting is that people don't know is that most plastic produced today is ultimately produced from either natural gas or byproducts of crude oil refinery.
Wow.
Yeah, so 86%. In 2017, 86% of what they're called HCl, so it's the things that make plastic. That's what you need them from. The major, they call them feedstocks, actually. It's the thing that you give it to make the chemicals and process of making plastic. So in the United States, 86% of them were natural gas from natural gas processing. And the U.S. Department of Energy projects that ethane, which is the building blocks of plastic, the stuff exports, will increase to 310,000 barrels a day this year, which is up from 180,000. So we're not only putting more plastic, America's making more plastic and sending it around the world in ships into the ocean.
And this is sad because you see all the time, you know, the pictures and the shot. I mean, you get the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You see the pictures of them opening up a whale and finding, you know, plastic red Solo cups in its tummy. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous that we've let it go this far. But when you talk about $2.5 trillion, that's a serious number. That's not to mess around with. We're not talking like chump change here. And that's frightening. It's
literally, and I think the thing that was interesting about the study is looking at it in a holistic approach. It's that, what does it cost to our health? What does it cost for everything? And part of that is by taking, what they did was take the, what the value is, the resource, as the resources we get, which have also declined, by the way, over about the last 10 years, the amount of resources we get from ocean life and from the ocean has decreased up to 5%. Yeah. So we're not getting as much out, and we're putting in more things that hurt it than ever before.
Completely, and as I was saying, Tab, too, it's that thing that it's all Jenga. You know, you pull out the wrong block, and the whole thing comes crashing down. And the ocean, I'm sorry, is a pretty big, makes up a lot of blocks in that in the jungle stack we call life here on Earth. I mean, Dr. Nicola Beaumont, environmental economist at Plymouth Marine Laboratory, who led the study, told The Guardian, quote, "Recycling a ton of plastic costs us hundreds against the cost of thousands if we let it into the marine environment. That's simple. Couple $100 to recycle some plastic rather than the thousands that we let get in there." That's what's so important about this.
And I think what's important too is learning how we can make plastic from other things. You can, and we do make plastic from plant materials. There's things that are made out of soy. There's whole, like, very, very, very lots of options out there, as we've talked about on the show. There's so many options of things to make plastic from other things. We can still have a plastic, a quote-unquote single-use plastic, but what if we made it from hemp byproducts, things that break down? But I think the biggest thing is really making a point to say that we have to get this out of the ocean, but we have to keep it out.
Yes, not repeating that.
Because it's like, look, if you're just a cold, hard capitalist, you're losing money.
Yeah. Yeah.
One-time use plastic loses money for everyone. You're literally ruining the market.
I don't want to have humanity's tombstone be that we died for our convenience. You know, we decided that convenience was more important.
But it also, keep an eye on the petroleum and the oil industries, because that means they're not only bringing more in order for us to refine here, it's also how can we sell off all those pieces to make more plastics to send around the world while we ban it here.
Ooh, man.
Oh, wow.
Down the fossil fuel industry. Please.
Any chance I can get.
Love it.
Oh, wow. If we all learned anything in science class growing up that we can remember, it's that no matter what, things can only exist as a liquid, a gas, or a solid. Until now. That's right. The rules of physics are being broken, and a team of researchers at the University of Edinburgh caught it in the act. With some help from some artificial intelligence, they found that in some situations, potassium atoms can exhibit the properties of both a solid and a liquid at the same time. And while it would probably only exist in this state naturally deep into the Earth's mantle, if you were able to pick it up, researcher Andreas Hermann says, quote, it would be like holding a sponge filled with water that starts dripping out, except the sponge is also made of water. To the scientists who made this discovery possible, I say, you matter.
You matter.
You matter.
So basically, potassium atoms, right? So basically, it's the same. It's as if you're holding an old banana.
Exactly the same.
It's like a whole old, wet, soggy banana is this new matter.
Yeah, you should go experiment with that and see if it works.
That is our show for you today. Remember, everyone, in this world, we are not told that we are loved enough, so I tell you all, I love you. I am Tyrell Ventura.
I'm Tabitha Wallace.
Keep on watching all those hawks out there and have a great day and night, everybody.